Yo, what's up guys? This is Brandon. I'm making this video so I can give you an update on the Patreon situation. So I say a lot of people, there have been a few people who have been really dedicated to giving towards my Patreon. And in the past that has helped me out significantly. Giving to the Patreon expands what I'm able to do with the content that I primarily produce. There was a small bit of time where that was like my bread and butter of like what I was living off of. But now that it's not the only way that I'm sustaining myself, it giving to the Patreon kind of gives me more creative freedom in some of the things I can do with the content I create. And so much for the people who have been dedicated to it, I've kind of wanted to revamp the Patreon completely and update kind of like the features and the content that they're getting out of it. So with that, I kind of want to give an update with everything that's been happening for me personally in like my life and as a creator. And I'll do that in a separate video. What I'll primarily focus on here is the changes that you're going to see to Patreon. So over and beyond, if you know me, one of the main things I do is I do the Elderon Tales, and I create lots of content and structure around the Elderon Tales. For the primary people who give on Patreon, that's their main interest, and I want to kind of upgrade the experience you get from the campaign and from the Patreon and have those interplay together. So on the Patreon, I'm going to be releasing lots more content that kind of adds to the YouTube channel. So if you are a follower of the YouTube channel and you do enjoy the YouTube channel, you'll get even more awesome stuff to go along with it from Patreon. As such, what you will see as a patron, everything that you were getting before should still be there. There were a couple features that just weren't really sensible or viable for me to give out in any way that I had to completely revamp. So I'll just go through the tiers real quick, and then the link to the Patreon will be in this video, and if you want to check it out on yourself, or if you want to check it out yourself, you can. So, I think what I'll do first is I'll talk about the new content coming to the Patreon. That's going to be an addition to the YouTube stuff that I already produce. So in addition to what's currently being made, once a week on Patreon, there's going to be a Monster of the Week, which is going to be a homebrewed monster that I have created for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. The statistics and everything will be there, and it'll be neatly packaged as a PDF with a description as to a little bit about the creature and what is, I guess, like some interesting habits and how the creature acts and its environment. So, and ideas of like what you can use the creature for. So that will be as a PDF, and it will be a high quality PDF, and these will be like high quality documents, and you use the creatures to do whatever you want. The creatures will either have been featured in Elderon or at some point be featured in Elderon, and there'll just be one of them a week into the future. So I've got quite a few of those queued up already, so look for those coming out on Patreon starting. I'm going to release this video ideally now, so maybe next week. Yeah, starting Monday. Oh, probably shouldn't put dates. Anyways, there's going to be a Monster Week on the Patreon. There you go. I will not date this video. The next thing that is really that's going to be really cool that's coming to the Patreon. I used to do this thing for fun with the Elderon Tales, where I would make all of these bingo cards for each group. So as each group went, there were just kind of very fun things you had expectations of each group. And if those things happen, you can mark them off on the bingo card, and you get bingo, and then it's fun, and everybody has enjoyment for it. So if you follow along with the campaigns, I'm going to be releasing bingo cards for each episode of each group on the Patreon. So that will be weekly, and those will come out the day of the session happening. Except for the very first one I'm doing, that one's going to be open to the public, and it is going to come out a day before the session, just because I want people to kind of see, like, oh, this is what this is going to be, if that's like your primary thing for giving $1. The next thing that I want to go over, I want to talk about the tiers of Patreon real quick. I've got them up on the other screen over here. That's why you see me keep looking over. I just revamped these, and some of them are the same, but some of them are new. So the first one is the Pretty Person Private Access. It gives you a presidential pass. If you get that tier of Patreon, it gives you access to everything I release on Patreon. Because my Patreon kind of talks about this. While I really do appreciate, there are people that give lots of money on there, I really just like creating content and sharing it with people. So ideally, in a super cool world, I could just release everything free to the public. But I do acknowledge there should be some type of merit to the people who decide to give on Patreon, which I'm super thankful for. So $1 gets you access to all of the Patreon-only content. So anything that I put out that's, Patreon only, $1 will give you access to it. The next thing that $1 gives you access to is any story in the future that I publish. I am going to have a thank you page for all of the Patreons all of the patrons that were patrons at the time when I published that story. So you'll get a shout out and any dedication for any story I make. Moving on from there, the next one is the Ilderon Tales Discord access. We have an Ilderon Tales server that you probably see on the live stream of people talking in it and everything, and it's how I keep in contact with the main part of my community, and it is how I talk and manage everything that I do for this channel. So if you give on the Patreon, not only do you get access to the Discord, which you can also get access through just clicking through the links in the description of this video, because I don't restrict who has access to it, but with Patreon you'll get additional roles and privileges on the server. You get a fancy little nameplate and color for all of your posts, and then you also get access to use the Discord bot we have, which shall play music and post GIFs and do other things if you type commands to her. Okay, so moving on that's the $5 access. Moving on to the $10 tier. The $10 tier is a student of generosity. You get everything listed in all of the previous tiers, but then also for $10 a month, you'll have early access to any content. So people are going to start seeing a lot more posts on my Patreon. And that's just, I'm going to put more content on there. That is what I'm going to do. That said, for the scheduled content I have that comes every week, like the Monster Week and the Session Bingo, and then a couple other things, like I have some stuff that I'm not going to do on a schedule, like short story ideas, character art, and kind of backgrounds and more imagery and stuff from the Ilderon Tales, and cleaning up some of those. So for those, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the regular posts come out on the day it's supposed to for all of the Patreon and all of the patrons. But on Monday, there's going to be an additional post for all the people with early access. That is the same content you'd get later in the week, just Monday, everything just comes out. So, yeah, you'll have access to that. Then, additionally, moving on there, I have to scroll down, so excuse my big forehead in the picture. Moving on from there, the next tier is the $30 tier. And this was kind of like the hardest one for me because I wanted to delete the $30 tier because I used to run a game where people could pay and sign up for the $30 tier, and then what they would have access to 10 or 4 free, or not free because they're paying for them, but 4 specially dedicated games ran for them of D&D games I would DM. That was really unsustainable and super difficult for me. So I was thinking about just deleting this tier and having, 1, 5, 10, 40. But I thought really, 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 really hard about the $30 tier and what would make it worth it if people wanted to sign up for it, because I think it's better to have it and let people choose if they want rather than just like deleting it and moving everybody down like a tier. So in addition to everything else that I listed, you're going to get all of those perks for signing up for the $30 tier. But on top of that, I'm going to be making a special vault on the Google Drive that I host for the campaign. And in that vault, it's going to be, Patreon, patron only access. But it's going to just be like all of like the dinky stuff I do behind the scenes with like notes for all of the hundreds and hundreds of little tiny NPCs that I keep up with running around in the background of the world that aren't like major characters. So I think that would be cool for some people to like who are interested, who want to poke around and read through that stuff. And it's just dozens and 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 dozens of people, inns, taverns, buildings, merchants, shops and things like that. And then I think what I'll do too is I'll try and put more artwork in there too to make that vault kind of worth it, so that you can find cool things of like royalty free artwork to use for whatever you want, or you can find some of the artwork that I create for the campaign that you can use as like desktop backgrounds or print out or do anything like that. So yeah, that will come with like a Google Drive link, and you'll be able, if you sign up for the $30 tier, you'll be able to go in and peruse that vault in anytime you want. Currently I have it set to sync to my computer, so ideally I wouldn't have to do anything additional for that. If like as I update my notes, Google Drive will update the folder, and then you guys can see like all of that stuff happening. The final tier is the Divine Intervention tier. Some people in the past have decided to give at this tier, and I really wanted to think of something super special to thank somebody who chooses to give at this tier. And the only thing I could think of really was like I have a private business email that I use for the Ilderon Tales, that I get literally no emails to except for the utmost of importance of emails. So this one time I scheduled an interview on the channel, and I interviewed some people who were big names in the D&D podcasting world. All of that correspondence was like through that email. And then there was like one small business decision I made that was like through that email. But in my mind, that email is prioritized of like the most important of the importance. So anybody who gives at this tier gains access to that email address. And what I'm doing with the Divine Intervention, so $40 a month, any question you have, like you want to do a Q&A or something, any question you have or issue you might be having related to storytelling, world building. Oh, look at that. Storytelling, world building, or Dungeons and Dragons, or the Eldorado Tales, you can send it to that email address, and I will either respond as soon as I can, comprehensively, or I will create a video on the subject discussing it. I love making these vlog videos. They're probably like the laziest videos in the world that I make, but they're super fun to do and sit down and, you know, talk at a webcam and get all of my thoughts out of my head and out into the ether. So if you have that, you could say, hey, I'd love to see a video on this subject, and then, you know, that coming week you might actually see, well, I mean, you will see a video on that subject. So yeah, that's the tier, the Divine Intervention tier, and of course that tier comes with everything before it. So for the people who have been giving on Patreon, I just want to again thank you so much. And this was my opportunity to reach out and give you a hug and try and make sure you get like a little bit more for your money. I do want to say that I know I make a little bit more on Patreon than other other people who have like Patreon, especially at my level, which is again why I'm so thankful for the people. But I also want to make it clear that I don't make a profit off of Patreon. Patreon kind of helps me recoup my investment into the campaigns. As it stands, I think the Patreons like at and I'm super comfortable talking about the numbers just to be upfront with everybody. But I'm pretty sure the Patreon makes about I have it right here, $115 a month. And then for the investments I have for the campaign, I'm spending probably about $80 or $90 a month on things like the Roll20 subscription, the Google Drive, the website, the sponsorships, and little things like that. And so then there's about like $20 or so a month left over that I just put aside and I save. And then I use that $20 to buy stuff to make the streams and all of the content better. And I'll buy books and PDFs for, you know, Dungeons and Dragons to share with all the players with that $20. You can actually see that I bought this green screen, so you might notice in the future that you know, we have like a chroma key green screen so people don't have to see my background, and stuff like that. The computer I use to stream off of is dying, so I used a portion of the Patreon money to upgrade my desktop computer, so I would have like a better computer to stream off of, and so things like that. When people give to the Patreon, it just gives me more flexibility in my life so that I can buy more things to create better content. I exist to tell stories. That is the thing that gives me joy in life. Telling stories and discussing stories is like my favorite thing to do. And if you watch the channel, I'm just super thankful to be able to share anything I create with you. And again, if you give on the Patreon, I just want to go over and beyond and let you know how thankful I am and that I want to do a little bit more for you to try and prove that, because, you know, actions speak louder than words. So thank you again, And that is where I'm going to end this video. Goodbye.